Welcome to getting involved in local politics and activism. My name's Mary Bo Robinson, and I'm really proud to join you from the Women's Place at The Ohio State University. As Andrea said, you have the choice now that we're in this breakout room to join by audio, but until we get to the Q&A a little bit later in the session, unless you just feel totally compelled, let's let our two guests who I'm about to introduce have the floor at the beginning. Today we are joined by two very distinguished women who are involved each day in politics and activism. I'd like to give you just a brief intro and we'll get started. Council member Shayla Favor, that you can see here on your screen, was appointed to Columbus City Council in 2019, and she currently is chairing three committees: Criminal Justice and Judiciary, Housing, and Public Service and Transportation. She's a native of the Dayton area and completed her undergrad at OSU and then graduated from Capitol's Law School. Prior to joining council, Shayla served as an assistant city attorney in the Columbus City Attorney's Office, and she had the opportunity there to litigate high-profile environmental lawsuits and work alongside leaders of the community to provide essential services and improve Columbus's neighborhoods. On a personal note, she and her husband Corey live on the Near East Side, and they have a 7-year-old puppy named Hudson. I had a 15-year-old puppy, and my husband constantly reminded me that's not a puppy, but he was. Okay, so next we have Dr. Tina Pierce. Good afternoon. Tina is a servant leader who is focused on creating empathetic, informed, and confident leaders who strengthen communities. She's a member of the Columbus Board of Education, but she's also the founder and executive director of the Worth Foundation, meaning working through obstacles, reaching true heights. This organization fosters community engagement through civic education and leadership development. And behind me, you can see our current Office in Diversity and Inclusion at the OSU, where I must have just missed Tina because she's a former employee at ODI. So, welcome to both of you. We're so glad to have you here. The topic that we're talking about today, politics and activism. To kind of start out, why don't you address your own personal story that led you to politics and activism? And give us a little background and we'll go from there. And Shayla, if you'd like to go ahead and begin, please do so. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for providing me with the opportunity to address you all in this setting. So I think it's the reverse for me. I started with activism, which helped to inform and lead me towards this now world of politics. So politics wasn't my original goal. When I was a budding student at The Ohio State University, I was confronted with the reality of being, once again, a minority in a majority space. And at that time, the voices of African-American students of color, it looked a lot different than it does today. There was the Black Cultural Center which was the cornerstone for many students of color, and there were opportunities to engage, but yet and still faced with lots of opposition. I remember when I was a freshman on campus, and I'm from Dayton, Ohio, so this was the first time being in Columbus, honestly, was coming to Ohio State. And there was a festival, which it's still going now. It's called the African American Heritage Festival. At the time, it was called the Block Party. It had been deemed the Block Party. And if you all are familiar with this, that's great because that gives you a little context for where I'm going. But this was my first encounter with this. And the idea was to celebrate the contributions of African Americans to campus of OSU and Ohio State at large, but then just to the country in general. And so there would be programming that would happen all week long. But the reality is that there were people who were very concerned about the increased presence of Black people on campus. And so it became known as white flight, literally white flight. And I lived in Stradley Hall, and I can remember when the festival came around, literally half the dorm cleared out. My white colleagues were gravely afraid of what would happen if Black people were coming to their beautiful campus. Fast forward to the next year, the increased presence of the event with Columbus Police Department instituting some more stringent regulations on what that festival looked like, to the point where there was concern about what people visiting Columbus would look like and the damage that it could potentially do. And so you saw strong regulations around, well, how does High Street need to be regulated? Let's block it off. Let's make sure that there's certain access points. All of this to say that there was a lot of negative pushback associated with this idea of celebrating one's heritage, celebrating the contributions of Black people to this community, the community that being OSU. And so I've always been an organizer at heart, and this really struck a chord with me. And I remember organizing a protest march and it being covered by the Lantern at the time. And it wasn't even a second thought for me. It was, this is wrong, and I want to say why it's wrong. I want to acknowledge that we have a place here, whether we're the minority or not. We have a place here, and our voice deserves to be heard. I pay tuition just like everyone else does. And this idea of fear associated with something that you're unfamiliar with, I felt should be disconnected from the experience of going to school to begin with. We go away to these institutions to expand our experience of what it means to be American, what it means to be a female, but yet and still plagued with these same types of experiences that we've heard over and over again. And so I think that little moment of courage sparked something. It planted the seed in me that would kind of bear fruit later on in life. And so I've always had that voice and have found, and I think it's key because we're talking in a space of women here, finding your voice and then learning how to trust that voice, even when you're faced with opposition, even when you don't see that validation for your voice mattering, that you still find that courage in those uncomfortable moments to go out there and do that thing or protest that thing or whatever it is to your heart's desire, right? And so I have, after I graduated with a degree in political science and African studies. I knew that I was going to go to law school. My dream was always to go to law school, but I wanted to take an opportunity to explore my creative side. And so I did something really crazy, and my parents really thought I was insane, but I left Columbus and moved to Chicago to go to culinary school. And I just wanted to see, like, creatively, what can I do with my life? Like, I know I want to do this thing, but why not try, right? Like, why not at least get out there? And once again, finding that courage to, find your passion. I think the world wants to reduce us down, specifically women, down to just one thing. Like, you can only have one passion. You can only be good at one thing. But women are so multi-talented. We have the ability to, raise families and have amazing careers. We can literally and have done it all for hundreds of years. And I think it's time for us to embrace that and let go of this notion that I need to just box myself into just one way of thinking, one way of being, and having just one passion. So I did that, and I realized, you know what? I don't want to cook for the rest of my life. I want to do it, as a passion, right? But I don't want it to be my career. And so I found myself back here in Columbus and pursued my lifelong dream of going to law school. When I was at law school, I saw a lot of my colleagues, many of who were white, getting these amazing opportunities at large law firms. And I never had this idea of, I want to be somebody who, represents corporations, and no disrespect to that, like that line of field, but I always knew my voice was loud. I knew, and not loud in, in range, but loud in, I need to get things out. I need to be able to speak truth to power. I need to be able to say those uncomfortable things that no one is going to say, right? And so I knew that just sitting behind a desk was not going to be the path for me. And I found myself at the Columbus City Attorney's Office, where I had the unique opportunity to work in our communities, cleaning them up. And it was there that I further found what has now led me to this space now, in advocating for people who are unable to speak up for themselves, who have historically been discriminated against, whether that discrimination has been in the form of racism, sexism, ageism, all of the isms that we have in our vocabulary, and now being able to represent the residents of Columbus on a larger scale. And so that has been my activism to political space. If you would have asked me 2 years ago if I would be a member of the city council, it'd be no way. But yet and still here I am. I'm a person who believes in the process. I'm a person who believes in the journey. And I know wholeheartedly that every decision I have made, whether in the moment has felt good or has felt like maybe this wasn't so good, has helped to inform me as a leader, me as a woman, me as an advocate, me as an activist, right? To be able to sustain this political space. And Dr. Tina knows we were on the campaign trail last year. And, Mary, thank you for that introduction. I was appointed in January and had to run the same year to keep the seat. And that was no small feat. But that experience taught me that, number one, women, we can do so much, right? And especially in political spaces, we're seeing it now with Senator Kamala Harris, and how she has been perceived and received as a woman on the national stage. And so not only does she has her skin color working against her, but she's a woman as well. So you've got that double layer there that she's working through. And that means that all with that comes with, raising money to be able to do these things. But I think, that experience that Dr. Tina and I shared last year on that trail showed me we have the ability to do so much. And so if I can leave anything with you here today is, number one, don't stop dreaming. Never stop dreaming, never give up, never think that it's too late for you to step out there and try something new. I might look like I'm only 15, but that's a joke. But I have just leaned into the idea that we are all on a journey. And the destination is truly not the end goal, right? It's living and embracing each of these moments, good and bad, and what they can help us accomplish as we help others accomplish their goals. So I hope I stayed within time parameters, but I'm just grateful to be in front of you all here today.
Yes. Oh, no, you are perfectly right on time. So that proves again how much we can do without even realizing it. Um, so at this time, let's toss the ball over to Dr. Tina Pierce and give us a little bit of your story. Um, activism to politics. How did that happen? And what do you see kind of as the future?
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me this afternoon. So my story begins with my birth. It's important to know that I come from a working class family, in a working class family where women played a key and critical role in raising the children, but also holding down, a full-time job to be able to contribute to opportunities for children. My mother had me at a young age. And as a result of that, my entire extended family surrounded my grandparents, my mother to support and to raise me. I was the first grandchild, the first child, which makes me the oldest grandchild, the oldest sibling, the oldest cousin in my generation. And so because of that, I was raised to be a leader. I was raised to be a servant. I was raised to speak out when I saw injustices happening to my younger cousins, to my younger siblings. And it just so happened that that speaking out didn't always happen when it was somebody younger than me. When I saw injustices happening to my mother or to my grandparents, I would speak out and say, well, why is that way? And, why are we regulated to living in a particular side of town, but we can go over to Bexley and look at their Christmas lights. So my grandmother would ride me around neighborhoods, and we would look at houses and pick out which houses we could live in, and figure out, do we like the Christmas lights that are on this house, and look at those windows and look at those panes. And as we would go into those neighborhoods, into Bexley, into Whitehall, into Upper Arlington, my grandparents came from the South. My grandmother came from West Virginia, the daughter of a coal miner. So again, very working class roots. And when we would go in those neighborhoods, I would ask those questions. And, so very early on, I had this curiosity around social justice, around why are certain people given opportunities and others are not afforded the same opportunity. And so very early on, I started in school to want to be active in student council, because I understood, student council, you get to make a couple of decisions around the school. Do we have longer recess? What fundraisers are we doing? And it would never fail, because I was a child of busing. I didn't have those opportunities. My mother, again, was working and couldn't come to the PTA meetings, couldn't bring me to the after school program. So I was always continually shut out of student council opportunities, Girl Scouts. It was hit or miss whenever my mom or family could support me in doing that. And this is all before latchkey time, right? I was one of those kids that I often joke with my big cousin. In the third grade, I was going to South High School's basketball camp. I was the youngest girl there, but I was there with all these high school girls, playing basketball. And they treated me like I was a high school girl, knocked me down, and I would have to get back up. So I was a child that after school, my mother would call and say, catch this bus to go to this auntie's house or that auntie's house. So I literally grew up on all sides of Columbus, the south side, the north side, the east side, the west side. I have a very large family. My grandfather had 9 living siblings. My grandmother had 12 living siblings, and they were all here in Columbus, and they all had people. And again, remember, I'm the oldest of my generation. And so that's a lot to take on. And, in elementary school, I would try to be in student council and try to be in activities, and would continually get blocked out. And I never forget, in middle school, my 8th grade year, after being blocked out numerous times, our principal over at Woolworth Park implemented this this new policy. To be on student council, you had to give a speech in front of the entire school, and so I thought, oh, okay, I can give a speech. I had given my 5th grade DARE speech at Fairmore, so I felt that, okay, I have a little bit of practice doing this. And my grandmother set up with me and we wrote the speech together. So she was my first speechwriter. So we wrote that speech, and it just so happened I won. And that was a pivotal moment for me. My teachers to that point knew that academically I had talent, that academically I would work hard. I might not have been the smartest kid in our middle school, but I definitely was a hard worker. So they knew that I would work hard, but then they started to see, she's really a leader. And they started to give me opportunities to do things that our student council had never done before, to, instead of doing 3 or 4 fundraisers, we had one every month. We were able to bring in photographers to take pictures, and we had different spirit days, and they really allowed me to come to them with these ideas and suggestions. And so as a result of that, I had the pleasure, the opportunity to be mentored by our principal, by our assistant principal, by our English teacher, Miss Donna Matthews. Teachers started to take me aside and say, Tina, we see this leadership quality in you, especially when I would make some bad decisions. So don't think that I was like this great kid, because there were times where, I'm still a kid from Brittany Hills, and, there's some things you can't disrespect me, or there's some times where I'm going to be like, we just ain't having that. So there were times where it was like, that temper, would get the best of me. And it is during those times that my teachers really would come and mentor me and tell me about my leadership qualities, and they would recommend me for leadership programs. So when I went into high school, I started out in Northland at a teaching program. They had this great teaching program that if you were in Northland your 4 years, that you would transition over to Capital, and there would be financial assistance to help you, and you would become a teacher. And so for me, this was kind of good, because again, in middle school, I was that kid that was, tutoring my peers that didn't quite get an assignment, and are helping my younger sibling, helping my younger cousins with their homework. I was the teacher. So for me, it was, okay, well, let's go to Northland, and then let's go to Capital and go into teaching. And very quickly, I was able to see that there was a different level of privilege that the Northland students had versus the students that were coming from my neighborhood in Brittany Hills. Again, we're a working class community. We have very different struggles than my peers that were at Northland. A lot of those students were walkers. They, have been in music programs. Their parents had college degrees, whereas in the Brittany Hills area, our parents were lucky to have high school diplomas. Our parents were, wage earners. And so I didn't quite fit, and decided to go to my homeschool, which was Beechcroft. And again, had the great opportunity that teachers were able to see leadership qualities in me. So they recommended me for various leadership programs. I was that student in high school that would stand out and say, why is football just for boys? So me and all my cousins now, and this is important to know, when I went to Beechcroft, all of my cousins were there. So literally, you're going to school with the cousin that's maybe 6 months younger than you, and with another cousin that's maybe 6 months younger than her. So you're there with a family base, which just boosted my confidence even more. So I can remember as sophomores, all of us got a group of girls together, and we went to the football meeting. We girls wanted to play football, and we wanted to know why only boys were allowed to play football. And so we were doing stuff like that in high school, and I was speaking up. And again, teachers were providing me with these opportunities. I was named a YWCA Bright Future honoree. I was active in Teen Institute, Youth to Youth. The League of Women Voters, when I was younger, had this great leadership program where every Sunday they would bring, I want to say we were sophomores or juniors, they would bring about 40 young ladies together from all our high schools, and they would teach us leadership skills, how to run a meeting, how to set up agendas, was, how to resolve conflict. And so I had the great opportunity to get that training. So as a first generation student, to receive a scholarship from the Ohio State University was for me just the natural thing to do. Again, this was important because at the time my grandparents were janitors at Ohio State. So I had grown up as a youngster going on West Campus. That building is no longer there, but my grandfather was a supervisor over there, and I would go and I would help my grandparents clean buildings. My grandmother was over in the science area of campus. And so at the time, that's where they were making cars and doing all of these things. And I would go and I would sit over there with them and I would watch these students go to class. And I would say that one day that's going to be me, Grandma. One day I'm going to get that degree. And so when I had the opportunity to come to Ohio State, I was very focused and determined in serving my community and continuing my leadership. And through that, had the opportunity to go into our undergraduate student government. I was a senator. I ran for president. Unfortunately, got second place, but that never deterred me. I always stayed focused on, again, serving our community and speaking for those injustices that I saw, speaking for the lack of opportunities that were available, to groups. And it wasn't just about Black or, women or underprivileged, but literally when there was an injustice, I was just there, to speak out on it. And so as an undergrad, I studied political science as well as African and African American studies, double majored. Me and my husband met our freshman year. And then my junior year, we were fortunate enough to get pregnant. We had our oldest son, and that really pushed me to hurry up and get done with my undergraduate, right? Because it was like, okay, to that point, I was the first one in my family to go to college, to have the opportunity to graduate. And so my grandmother quit her job and said, I'm going to stay home and watch Andrew. You're going to finish. And so I was able to actually finish ahead of schedule with 2 degrees. So I actually double majored. I finished with 2 degrees and then was offered a scholarship to continue my studies in political science to get a doctorate. And at that time, at first, I had a plan. I'm gonna go to law school, because you see people who help the community, they have law degrees, right? And I had some great mentorship through Dr. William Nelson and Dr. James Upton, and they said, no, you're really a teacher. Give graduate school a try. So I went to graduate school, and during that time, was able again to really focus on ways in which and models that I could encourage people to be involved in not just politics, but engaged in their communities. I wanted people to understand that it wasn't just about Democrats versus Republicans or libertarians versus independents. It was really about what positive changes do you want to see in your community, and how can you lead? How can you help those changes being made? And so, with that, my dissertation focused on our Columbus City schools, and it looked at the level of community engagement that was occurring at our school board meetings. This is a time when Bill Moss was there, and Jerry Doyle was a community activist that would come, with gel stripes on. And it's interesting because Mr. Doyle is actually the grandfather of 4 of my little cousins, right? So I was surrounded by all of these people that were really putting little nuggets of information into me, molding me to be the servant leader that I am today and that I aspire to be in the future. And so with those degrees, what I began to see happening when I went into academia was there was really this gap in information. A lot of people thought we need to understand politics and we need to understand, parties to really understand how to make a difference. And that's one component, but that's not it. You also need to understand how to develop your voice, how to be a leader in your community, how to point out not just problems, but solutions. And so as I was teaching at Columbus State, I taught at Denison, I taught at the Ohio State University, I decided to create a business, Work. birth, working through obstacles, reaching true heights, in which I would go out and teach cultural competency. So help people understand the diversity of not just racial and ethnic groups, but also values and thoughts in our communities. And so as I was teaching that in schools and communities and organizations, something very interesting happened in 2016. We had a very controversial election. And by that time, our older son had been joined by our 3 younger children, so he had siblings. And I was going out and I was teaching them how to create this positive change. And all of those students, I want to say they were about sophomores or freshmen at Coss High School, came back to me and said, you know, Dr. Pierce, you've been teaching us how to make change in our community, and look what happened. We depended on adults to represent us, and this is what happened. We want to protest. What can we do? We're not going to school anymore. And so I met with them and I said, you know, how can you really create that change? How can you sustain that change? How can you grow and cultivate future leaders? And so my son and I created the foundation then, which is a nonprofit, and we go specifically into schools so we can start to develop and create those leaders. Because what I began to see was the great programs that helped me develop my leadership skills, that helped me understand how to run a meeting, that helped me understand how to sit at a table with someone who had very different or opposing views than I had, were no longer there. With Teen Institute and Youth to Youth, you know, they would take us out into Dublin and we would be on Murfield golf course. And, you know, I would be there with my peers who were going to Dublin, and they would be talking about visiting Brown and, you know, how their parents came from Harvard. And I would just be sitting there like, well, wow, you know, my mom's a unit clerk at Riverside Hospital and my grandparents mop floors. Like, how am I ever going to have an opportunity to create change? And so Teen Institute provided us with this opportunity to get to know one another, to get to know our values. And what I began to see was that young people didn't have that. So me and my son created the organization, and we've been committed to increasing the engagement of our community and really bringing along future leaders. And now as a school board member, every day I just wake up honored and privileged to have the opportunity to represent our community as a product of the district, that's committed to advancing student learning. And this is important because, again, my purpose in life is to empower people to create change. And the best place to start is with our students, from pre-K all the way up. So I have that great honor and privilege to do that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, what great stories you both have. So there's kind of the inspiration, and now you find yourself in these positions that you have to run for. And I guess Tina was practicing back in 5th grade when she was writing her speech. So she got an early start. But tell us a little bit about some of the nuts and bolts that, you know, until you're right in the midst of it, you can't even imagine what it takes to get elected. So I don't know, Shayla, do you have any thoughts that you might want to share with us?
Yeah, it's a whole nother world that I was unfamiliar with. It is a space that is predominantly dominated by white men, regardless of what position you're looking at. Prosecutor, local elected officials, statewide, this is a field that is dominated by white men. And so as a woman, you have to go into that space with the understanding that you're going to have that obstacle, and that people might not validate your voice. If they're not validating your voice, that means that financially they're not validating your voice. And, you know, elections cost money at the end of the day. Until that is removed from our electoral process, that is the system that we have to work around. And so I think that's one of the greatest, I guess, obstacles that I saw in the process. I love the engaging. I love the having the conversations, you know, on porches and introducing people to who I am. But there is that level of, am I good enough? Am I good enough to ask for money? Am I good enough for you to believe in? Am I worthy of this? And these are all things that women deal with, questions we deal with all the time. And it's a resounding yes every single time. So yeah, that'd be my answer to the question.
And I would just contribute to that session by indicating that one, we are a party system in terms of how our political system operates. And so in some instances, you will have races that are nonpartisan. So for example, our school board race is nonpartisan, but our political parties play a huge role in that. And so for me, the first time I ran for school board, I was an unknown entity. I had not been active in local governance. Because I was a professor, I did not want my students to think that I was subjective. I wanted them to think that I was very objective. So never was I really engaged in party politics. And so because of that, when I ran, the party looked at me like, well, who are you? And are you really a Democrat? And can we really trust you? And not only that, because I came from academia, there was this, well, do you think you're smarter than everybody? Or, you know, how do you fit into politics? Will you be analyzing us? And so it's important that you understand that. Even if you're not quite sure how strong of a Democrat you are, or, you know, if you're a progressive and where your progressive values fall, it's important that you understand that parties play a key role in the election, especially here in the state of Ohio and Franklin County. And so for me, the party didn't come out the first time I ran to endorse me. I actually beat the sitting incumbent, who was the school board president, in the primary. And that's when all the party resources kicked in to beat me to ensure that that wouldn't happen. The other thing that I would say when it comes to campaigning and running for office, be sure that you have a mentor. I shared earlier that I had the great opportunity to receive mentorship as a young person. And even now, I'm continuing looking for opportunities to mentor other people that want to come through the pipeline. I often tell people, if I'm still on the school board in 8 years, there's a problem, because I need to cultivate a bench. I need to bring somebody else up the ladder. So ensure that you're looking for people who can mentor you, who can put you in the position that you want to be in. And when I say put you in the position, I mean they can walk you in the room, they can help you raise that money, they can make phone calls to say, this is a person that we believe in, that we want you to support.
Kind of goes back to what y'all said earlier about having your community around you and knowing your community and expanding your
organization. So please come to Ready to Run, December 4th and 5th.
From a political space, I would also elevate Ignite. They do a lot in this realm of uplifting women in the political space. And then Dr. Pierce referenced the Matriots, who really made a name for themselves in a very short amount of time. I think the reality is, as both of us have kind of indicated, that there are barriers, actual barriers for women who are trying to get into politics. Number one being money. And so that's where an organization, a PAC like Matriots, is incredibly important to help rally around women from a nonpartisan perspective and providing resources to assist them in their campaign efforts. And then I will also throw out there the Collective PAC. They have a focus for candidates of color who are looking to seek office and need assistance, financial assistance. And they have actually helped to really bring an awareness to politics for the state of Ohio, and really get a lot of focus around some of the campaigns that probably wouldn't have gotten the national recognition had it not been for strong advocates like them.
I'm glad to be back. I have no idea, but I got pushed back into the main room, and there I was looking around. So I guess y'all found your way back too. Women figure it out.
Yep, we do. We just been having a conversation, Mary. You didn't miss anything.
That's right.
I probably did miss
some questions. It was good stuff.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear it. And I had no doubt. I was just aggravated to miss it. It sounds like y'all have done some good networking, and I'm scared we're all going to get pushed out here shortly. What is one of the takeaways, even not from the panelists, from those of you who have been sitting here and interacting, what's a takeaway that you got from our brief time together? Or another question you may have. It may have brought more questions to the forefront. I'm gonna give you just one real quick one. I hope you were there for the keynote earlier today. If not, it was definitely well worth it. But it definitely talked about the power of women's anger. And I wouldn't say anybody here was powerfully angry, but I think our panelists did share with us that their activism started from a place of knowing something wasn't right. And that resonates with me very strongly. Something's not right, and then asking why, what can I do about it, and calling it out. And so I definitely can see those strong stories in our two panelists today, and in so many women out there running and, you know, knowing something's not right, they want to do something about it, and then running into those barriers that we've discussed. You know, and that's where I guess hopefully, if we don't do anything else, obviously vote, but be a community to your people who step out there to run, because it isn't easy. It's not easy, that's for sure. So any other thoughts or final comments from anyone?
I think you're spot on, Mary, with this idea. There's a book that I've just started to read. I think it's entitled Eloquent Rage. And, you know, there's this notion that women don't have the autonomy to express anger, or at points in which one should be able to express said anger and or rage, right? That we have to find ways to navigate the politics of spaces where if it was a man in the position, that they would be entitled to that anger and that rage, and can express it in whatever form, in whatever way they want. And so I believe Dr. Tina and I, and anyone who is in this space, has to learn to navigate the politics of that as well. It doesn't make it right. It is the world and the society that we live in. But I believe it's incumbent upon us as women to continue to break those barriers for outspoken women and leaders like Dr. Tina and others who have come and led the way before us, to continue to speak our truth and continue to blaze trails for others to come alongside us and break this mold. So, you know, step by step, you know, I think we're getting there. I think we're going to break a huge barrier when we have a VP in the House by the name of Kamala Harris in November.
All right.
I just realized I have 4 political signs representing 5 people in my yard. 4 of them are women. So
Women rock.
yes, we do. Take care. Please go back to the harvest room with us.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank
Bye.
Thank you so much.
If you have
Thank
any
you.
additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Just Google me and you'll see all my email addresses. Please feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Well.